this meeting to order. Is there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, I'll move on to opening remarks. Welcome to Budget 2020. This is our kickoff meeting, and I'll let the CAO Manoj Dalwaria start this off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just have a very brief overview of what is going to be presented tonight. And after my presentation, my brief comments, our Director of Finance is going to do a presentation and just provide a brief overview of the budget. So earlier this month, we have provided councillors with budget binders. I hope you had a chance to review it. And tonight we are going to discuss the draft operating budget and draft capital budget, and then it's for discussion and approval. As you all know that the staff has put in a lot of effort in putting this budget together, and we have tried to prioritize our requirements to make sure that we have optimized the budget. The draft budget that you are going to see tonight is very similar to one that was approved last year. Council has late last year, provided us with a guidance of budget increase target of 2% for departmental and 1% for infrastructure or asset. In your budget binder, you will find that we have provided you with a budget that achieved this target. However, also in your budget binder, you will find a request for additional resources that the staff would require to maintain the level of service that we are currently providing. Just like to reiterate or mention that city's portion of the budget only represent about 40% of the tax bill on an average residential home. The other 60% is contributed by the urban service area levy, the hospital levy, the educational levy, and also the regional levy. And one thing I like to point it out to you that this year our new building permits are more than 25% what we were last year. Our growth assessment last year by MPAC was 4.1%. This year our growth was slated to be 2.74, despite that our building permits much higher. I think the reason why it is that how MPAC does their calculations. So only after the building is occupied, it is included in the growth. So this is the reason why, despite that higher building permit that was issued this year, we have seen considerably low growth assessment this year. Hopefully we'll have good growth in 2020, and that will help us with our growth in the next budget. So tonight, after my comments, as I said, our director is going to provide a budget overview. So if you see in your budget binder, what we can do is, following the presentation by the director, we can go page by page on the operating budget, which is in tab 3. Thereafter, we can discuss the recommended additions from the deferred list in tab 2. And after that, if you want to bring anything forward for discussion from the operating budget, please do so. And then once we have discussed the operating budget, that we can go over to the capital budget. And if you want to pull out any items for discussion in the capital budget, we can do that. So at this time, I'd like to pass it on to our Director of Finance, Maria Morrow, who is going to do a presentation and go through all the components of the budget. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city has 4 budgets: the general operating budget and the capital budget, which form part of this package, along with the water and sewer budgets, which will be addressed later this quarter. With new construction development, new infrastructure is required. The new construction brings in more people, be it residents, tourists, or employees. This increase in infrastructure and people will increase the demands for service, which will in turn increase our operating expenditures, especially staffing. The demand for service starts with the building department, with the planning department, then moves to the building department as the developments occur. But eventually, this will filter down to require increases to all departments to service the established developments, such as snow plowing, grass cutting, water and sewer works, roads, streetlight hydro and maintenance, fire services, capital renewal, billing and administrative functions. It should be remembered that the growth dollars may be received up front, and then once a critical mass is achieved, then additional costs for staffing and equipment will be required. While growth pays for most of the capital costs through development charges, the ongoing operating costs to service the growth must be paid for through the levy, as services must be provided to the new residents and to the new subdivisions and properties, along with the new infrastructure that will need to be maintained. In some cases, it may actually cost more to service the growth than what we attain in tax revenues from the growth. We should strive to achieve blended growth, especially commercial and industrial assessment, to achieve sufficient tax revenues to cover the costs. With residential growth, this will attract commercial growth. Our economic development efforts should be directed at business growth and business retention. For this year, we experienced growth of 2.74%, and we are also forecasting an additional 1.1% growth through supplemental tax revenue increase during the year. For funding, there is an interrelationship between all the various sources, in that a reduction in one area must be funded from the other areas and normally onto property taxes. This chart shows both funding options for both capital and operational expenses. Some of the items, such as grants or investment income, are beyond our control. So we need to consider other areas which we control so that the burden is not totally loaded onto property taxes. While reserve funding for ongoing operating expenses can occur, it normally is a very short-sighted move and really shouldn't be from a best practice perspective, as it is not sustainable. The city issues the tax bills which encompass not only city taxes, but regional and educational taxes as well. The city general budget taxes represent about 39% of the total bills across all the property classes, with the bulk of the taxes being levied for region and educational purposes. To provide some reference, a 1% levy change equates to $151,000, and a 1% levy change equates to about $10 per year to the average residential home valued at $253,700. For 2020, staff was provided with direction to bring in a budget at 3%. The draft operating budget as presented meets this target and requires $867,000 to balance, with 2% departmental net levy increase and a 1% infrastructure net levy increase, for a total levy increase of the targeted 3%. The gross operating budget amounts to $22.9 million, with transportation, which includes transit and winter control, along with fire, amounting to about 45% of our total gross expenditures. The package provides specific impacts by department, but I'd like to just provide you with a global summary of some of the major impacts in the budget. Salary and benefits and honoraria costs for our current complement represent about 48% of the expenditures in the draft operating budget at approximately $10.9 million. Increases to wages and benefits for existing staffing and council to cover contractual increases, step increases, annualization costs, OMERS, statutory and health benefits are forecast to increase by $542,000. A number of positions are funded from non-levy sources, such as grants, building permits, and parking enforcement revenues. This brings the levy impact down to $356,000. The next impact, as normal, is our asset renewal. This chart demonstrates how we are progressing in the ability to sustain our non-water and sewer assets. Please note that these are estimated annual totals. The green bar is the current budget provision. The yellow bar is the amortization expense based on historical costs. And the red bar is where we need to be on an annual basis to maintain our assets based on their replacement cost. This shows that we need an additional $2.9 million per year to fully fund our assets. You can see that we are not funding sufficiently in any category, with the worst ones being transportation and buildings. On a positive note, however, tremendous progress has been made over the past few years, which has resulted in us covering at least the amortization expense and beginning to contribute towards replacement costs. Sustaining our assets is an area that we must continue to address, not just from a best practice goal, but from a provincially mandated obligation. There are a number of new legislated obligations from the province in respect to assets, which will impact us over the next few years. A strategic, by July 2021, an updated asset management plan for hard services will be required. We did complete the first step by July 1st of last year, which was the strategic asset management plan, which was finalized. For July 2023, the asset management plan will have to encompass all the assets, not just the hard services. This is a major undertaking, and we have hired a capital asset accountant in 2019 to lead this project. Our projected phase-in increase was estimated at $664,000. To mitigate the levy impact, however, only $306,520 was included. The transportation contribution, which is required under our asset management plan at $256,520, was met. However, only $50,000 increase was placed to fund the replacement of all other assets. So the levy impact for the infrastructure is $306,520. We provide a grant to the library for which they've requested an increase of $21,000 or 3.2%. In addition, the budget includes provisions for increases in the Community Improvement Plan grants, specifically the tax increment grant, with Artisan Ridge coming on stream. The impact here is estimated at $121,000. The report came forward last night for insurance, and we saw that the increase in our insurance premiums and deductible provision, less some of the amounts that have been allocated in the library along with the water sewer budgets, we will see an impact to the general operating levy of $125,000 from insurance. The city needs to appropriately fund our potential for uncollectible taxes, and our provision has been made to increase this amount by $80,000. Legal fees have been increased by roughly $107,000 and include an estimate of $75,000 for the LPAT zoning bylaw appeal. As this is a one-time item, provisions have been made to fund this amount from reserves, leaving a net impact to the levy of $31,700. We see a net overall impact from certain other expenditures of $42,000 with salt, utilities, and communication cost increases, partially offset by reductions in the tree removal program and landfill monitoring costs. We do see a net benefit to the levy as the listed revenues increased by roughly $351,000, with estimated increases in supplemental tax revenues and investment income forecasted. So in summary, the net levy shows the 2% departmental increase and a 1% infrastructure provision increase. This will impact the average overall tax bill across all property classes by 1.2%, and as indicated, the council target has been met. For the residential class, the average home will see a $56 increase from the city's general budget. This represents a 1.59% increase to their overall tax bills. And again, these are estimates only, as the tax ratios have not yet been finalized by the region. The report includes listings which total $14.5 million in reductions and deferrals that have been used to reduce the levy impact, with the largest item being the Fire Station 1 construction deferral. The presence of any item on the list does not mean that staff are supportive of the reductions or that the items are not needed, merely that the overriding factor was the levy impact and meeting the target. The General Committee can review the deferral list as part of your deliberations. Staff, however, would respectfully suggest that this level of deferral is concerning and impacts upon our city's ability to maintain expected service levels. Staff have reviewed the deferral list, and we have identified a number of positions that we feel are necessary to the effective functioning of the city and the provision of services to our residents. This would add $274,000 to the levy, or an additional 1.82%. This would equate to a net levy increase of 4.82%, or 1.9% to the overall bill. This means an average impact to the residential home of $82 per year. Moving on to capital, the total capital budget is for new capital works totaling $17.8 million, with 41% related to recreation and 40% relating to hard services, roads, water, sewers, and sidewalks. Of note, the two major projects for 2020 are the Front Street reconstruction and the contribution to the Canada Summer Games. Over the next 10 years, we estimate total capital project works requirements of $126.6 million. The report also identifies the total capital funding gap that the city faces over the next 10 years, which is estimated at $46 million. This will require the need to issue debt and incur debt servicing costs in our annual budget, less any grants or fundraising that we are able to garner. We need to remain cognizant of this today as projects are approved, as this may impact on our ability to proceed in future. We need to ensure that we prioritize projects and make decisions taking that long-term view. Of note, there are a few big-ticket items in the forecast: arena major works, 2 fire stations, combined sewer separation phase 2, road growth-related road urbanization, and the operations center. The city is presently very well positioned from a debt standpoint, with only $950,000 outstanding projected at the end of 2019, and this relates entirely to the City Hall. This debt will be fully paid off in 2026. In addition, we have financed a number of capital projects internally with payback over a number of years. The city in 2011 committed $5.7 million towards the new hospital. We levy $298,000 per year as a separate levy on the tax bill, and this will be there until 2026. This chart depicts our reserve position, excluding hydro. While we have an estimated combined available balance of about $24 million. In reality, the bulk of the holdings are in restricted or legislated reserve funds. Available general balances for operating and capital are estimated at $6.5 million. For hydro, the projected interest is $552,000, with the utilization proposed being similar to that of previous years. That is debt servicing City Hall, capital asset transportation, and capital asset general provisions. It should be noted that the hydro interest provides a benefit to the levy of 3.4%. Further to council request, staff have provided some backup information on the usage of the hydro funds, and these were placed on your desk this evening. For risks and opportunity, as always, we do have some that we need to be cognizant of, and that is revenue and expense projections, any new grant programs that are announced that may require municipal contributions, and any in-year overruns or emergencies. Staff would respectfully suggest that it should be the budget that establishes service levels, and that in-year overruns or adjustments should be limited to emergencies or grant-related items. Further to CAO's comments, this is the suggested process that has worked well in the past. Any changes to the draft budget are voted on by the General Committee as you go through the 3 sections. These sections can be reconsidered at the end of the budget process, immediately prior to the final adoption of the budget. This ensures that we differentiate between general discussion and changes, which are then formalized and recorded in the minutes. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Maria. Are there any questions for Maria before we move forward on the operating budget? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Maria. Maria, you mentioned in regards to the asset renewal, $2.9 million shortfall. Per year, what would council need to put in there over, I know this has probably been here, I've been here for 20 years, and this is something we've put off for 20 years.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have made great progress, believe it or not, because when we first started, we were at a shortfall of about $4 million. So if you go on page 50, that really shows us what we should be. We started with a 10-year phase-in plan, and we've got 4 years left. So of the 2.9 million, by rights, we should be adding, based on what we've done this year, we should be adding an additional 736,000 for future years.
Each year?
Each year to meet your target.
And
then beyond that, you've got inflation. So, you know, it's not a static number.
And presently, 1% of the budget represents 137 or
$151,000.
151. It changes steadily. Amazing. Okay. Thank you. That's good for that one. Yep. If I could, in regards, I don't know through, she mentioned in the report though, in regards to the landfill monitoring, I see that it was a decrease of 35,000. Were we getting to a point where that was going to be eliminated 100%? Or trying to? We were going to solicit and see if we could?
Sean, I'll turn, do you have a...
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure we'll be able to eliminate it entirely, but I think based on the results we've been finding, that we can reduce the amount of monitoring required. There seemed to be a trend towards the stabilization of the gas that's coming from the site.
Okay, this time, that's just the only two, firstly.
Okay. Any other questions before we move forward? And everybody's good with the procedure as laid out by our CAO and our Director of Finance that we've used in the past? Is everybody good with that?
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start with the operating budget, which begins on page 17. That gives you your overview per department, and the in-depth goes as we move forward. So first page is an overview of the total expenditures, and the breakdowns are in the following page.
I think they're trying to put it.
Oh, okay. We got it. Go ahead, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maria, I have a question for you, if you're the right person I'm directing it to. That money that's in the reserves for hydro, it says that the interest, we're getting 506,000. What's the interest rate we're earning on that money that's,
Right?
because sort of when I estimated, I'm getting 0.5%. Are we only making 0.5% on that money that's sitting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're forecasting for 2020 3.25%.
3.25.
3.25.
Don't forget, some of that money's taken up in the internal debenture as well. Okay?
What do we got?
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
I know what they're getting at, Mr. Mayor. I think, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Maria, we have very strict guidelines on what we're allowed to invest that money in, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are correct, and we did, I believe in November, we brought forward the report that, will give us a little bit more flexibility with what we can do with the hydro, but certainly in terms of what a municipality of our size is able to invest in, it's very, very limited.
Okay? Okay, so we got it up now? Okay, so we're on page 17 for beginning. And that's your overview, and then we move into the breakdown as we move into. Okay, are we good to move to page 18, which is the budget summary of general expenses? So I'm sure some of you have made notes, and if you bring up highlights and you want to ask questions or that as we go along, bring them up as we go through the pages. Go ahead, Councillor Hanlon.
Just ask a question. In the recommend, because we're going to go through each department more or less first.
Yeah.
In the recommended deferrals, can we not detail which department each deferral is related to as we go along? So we're looking at their budget and,
Well,
just it might be in the clerk's department. We're going to talk about the clerk's department. Or one of these positions about the
well,
clerk's
I think when
department?
you go to the deferral list, it actually breaks it down per department.
No, I know, I realize that, but, so we're going to go through each department, and at the end, we'll come back, and we want to add
And
that?
then we'll go to the deferral list per department.
Okay,
Okay?
yep. Yeah, I just didn't know if we were going to deal with that, each department, or just deferrals all at once.
No, we're going to do those after. Okay, so we're on to Director of Finance report. If you see something you want to go back, by all means, we'll go back. Don't worry about it. Just, Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Just a quick question on the financial system coordinator. Is that a one-time cost for this coming year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as part of that modernization fund, the grant that we got, we allotted 18 months for this person to finish the implementation of all our systems. So we're seeing the first 12 months in 2020, and then we'll have another 6 months in 2021. But there's no levy impact because it's fully funded from the grant.
Do you see having to utilize it beyond a year and a half?
At this point, I don't believe so, because we hope that within that 18-month period, we can get all of our financial system modules fully implemented. And it's not just the financial. I know there are some other modules, you know, for example, in the clerk's department for marriage licensing, the digital marriage licensing. So we hope that within that 18-month period, that's fully grant funded, we can get it all done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Maria. I was wondering if you could tell me, maybe I'm missing it in here somewhere, transportation, what does that include? Like, what is transportation, just busing? Is it?
From an FIR, from the provincial standpoint, transportation is things like your roads, your street lights.
Yeah.
I'm drawing up bridges. Just here. If you go to page 25, Councillor Sandens,
Okay.
there's roadway subsidized, there's sidewalks, there's bridges, there's winter control, there's street lighting. So those are all from a provincial standpoint deemed to be transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's, we'll move on to the clerk's department, page 20. If anyone wants to go back at any time, we'll go back. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this question is for Donna, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just saw the line item for Ontario Disabilities Act. Does that money go towards us making sure we're in compliance? And
through you, Mr. Mayor, $10,000 of it goes towards our consultant, and $6,000 goes to reserve for improvements.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions on the clerks? Okay, we'll move on to fire. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, just a quick question through you to the fire chief. On our licensing that we have put in place and are working on, specifically for students, is there anything in this particular part of the budget that you have put aside for that purpose?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, licensing for not in the operating budget, no.
The CAO can answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we did the residential licensing, we have allocated about $25,000 that should go towards to fire. So the whole calculation was done that some efforts will be required from the fire department. Whether right or wrong, at that time, the calculation was that $25,000 will go towards fire. Thank you.
So that's already included in the budget.
It is not included here, no, because also the thing is that at that time it was realized that we will achieve the residential licensing at a much faster pace than we are now. So if you look at it, I think we have about 500 units that are licensed, many more to go. So the revenue that has been projected at that time, we are still running short of that.
From a fire department's perspective, the inspections, there's funding in our budget for the inspections from a fire department point of view.
So, Mr. Mayor, when the whole process was put together at that time, and then the intent was that $500 will be charged per licenses for 2 years. At that time, my understanding, the calculation was that $25,000 should go to the fire department per year.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I don't believe, if it's through you or to the fire chief, I don't believe the fire department actually has anything to do with licensing anymore. We already settled this before.
Yeah.
I think it's all part of the building division, right?
Go
Am I
ahead,
right? That there's
Jason.
actually no budget in the fire department because you have nothing to do with licensing or inspections anymore.
I think they're
Is
only.
it all through the building department?
I'll let Jason answer that. My understanding is if they need to call them in, they call them in. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so fire does play a part, although not as big a part currently as was originally intended, but fire does play a part in it. The majority of it is done by the bylaw enforcement division. However, we are currently in talks with the fire department on how they can become more involved because we feel it's important that they be more involved with that process.
If I can then, see, to me, there shouldn't be any addition to the fireman's budget because we're actually already paying them. And that's part of their duties, I would believe, as a fire service and that stuff, if we needed to request. So it confused me that even anything's in there for the fire department. It don't need to be in there.
I think originally it was put in because of their role they played on doing all the, looking over the plans and when it first was implemented. And then we streamlined the system, and that's why they don't anymore.
So I'm saying if there is monies in that budget, then we should maybe put a motion forward that we withdraw it from the fire budget.
No, but it's not in now.
Okay, that's what I'm saying then. So
Yeah.
it's not in, so that's why we're saying there's no need to even discuss it. It's not there.
It's not in.
Okay.
Okay.
Good point though, Mr. Neal.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, the negative amount there for the revenue, that was because part of the year we didn't have a chief last year, is that right? For 2019? And then why is it in the same line for 2020?
Through Mr. Mayor, the fire department does generate revenue.
Oh, that's revenue.
That's revenue. The
Oh, I thought
minus
that
is
was
net.
because we didn't have a chief for part of the,
No. This compares budget to budget.
okay.
So the revenues are, you get what, MTO fees, false alarm fees, things like that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to Chief Building Official. We can go back again at any time if you have a question. Oh, excuse me, we missed planning. We can't miss planning, right, Richard? We'll do planning. I'm page 20. I'm on page 22. You're right. Okay, so we need questions for Richard now. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if my question's for Richard, but I was just wondering if maybe Maria knows what we normally spend annually on LPAC. Or LPAT, sorry, on any appeals. If this is like an annual thing? Richard does know.
You want to take it?
This is a one-time LPAT hearing that is discussed in this portion of the budget. It's relating to the zoning bylaw that we have. And it is a rough estimate at the present time. We're hoping to get a more definite estimate from our lawyer after we have gone through the next pre-hearing conference to understand sort of where we've landed with the settlement in some of those appeals. So hopefully it can be reduced, but I understand that the other LPAT hearings are addressed through reserves, or? So that's where that LPAT hearing is coming from.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that LPAT appeal cost, is that legal fees or is that professionals? Or is it a combination? Do we know? Sorry, Richard. The LPAT appeal cost, is that for just legal fees or is that to hire professionals?
At the present time, we don't know if we need to hire professionals, but it would be for legal fees.
Okay, and I wanted to jump on the comment about the LPAT appeals for other issues, because this is just a zoning bylaw. The LPAT appeal for development charges is going to be quite high. Where is that money coming from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there was an amount, there was $9,000 that was approved as a budget overrun last year for the LPAT appeal. And there's an additional $21,000, so they have budgeted $30,000 as part of the 2019 budget overrun. So we've got $30,000 allocated for that.
I believe at the time we were told this could cost upwards of $50,000 by the CAO. Are we going to have an overrun on this, or?
So, in some cases, we pay through our legal fees where we have to. And again, in any hearing, like Richard is mentioning, these are all in estimates depending on how long and what resources are required for that. So at the time when we would have estimated, it would have been estimated, that was the estimate. So at this point in time, I think we spent, as Maria has mentioned, about $30,000.
That's what's budgeted.
That's budgeted, yeah.
So the legal fees come out of your department, Mr. CAO?
Yes, it does.
They do? How much do we allocate annually for legal fees?
Maria can talk about it, but it varies every year, and depending on sometimes we don't anticipate that we are going to LPAT and the hearings, it varies, but I think Maria can give the number how much is estimated for 2020 or was estimated for 19.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're estimating $198,000 in total legal fees. That includes a $75,000 for the planning LPAT appeal.
Okay. Did you have a question?
Yes, in regards to that, just to further up to what Councilor Longo said, if we do go over budget, what reserve are we taking the monies from, or where will we get the monies from if in regards to the development charge fees bylaw appeal? Where would that monies come from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, well, likely it would be a general budget overrun at that point. Or we could, depending on the magnitude, we could assess at the time that the overrun comes through to see if we do have some surpluses in other areas, or we could tap into one of the contingency reserves.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, now we can go on to Chief Building Official. Go ahead, Councillor.
I just want to go backwards for a second, if I
Yeah.
could, just to these legal fees and so on. Maybe somebody can help me here. With legal fees for LPAT appeals, is this similar to, I guess, your normal everyday legal proceedings where a loser in an appeal may be asked to pay for the other side's legal fees? Does LPAT work like that? Is there, what I'm asking, is there a chance that our legal fees could go up substantially if we lose an appeal and have to pay our cost plus the other person's?
Through your worship to Councillor Longo, the understanding is that the person, when they're doing the appeal, needs to ask for costs up front, and then the LPAT hearing or hearing officer would make an assessment at the end of the hearing. But it's not normally that there's costs associated with an LPAT hearing.
Okay. Okay, Chief Building Official. Go ahead, Councillor Sutton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jason. With the residential licensing catching up on those inspections, how about the new builds and everything else that we're doing inspection-wise? Are we behind in those? And is fire involved in those inspections?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we are currently in a fairly good position. I'm assuming you're referring to building permits. So with building permits, we are in a good position. We don't really have much of a backlog of any sort. And yes, fire does play a part in that, not only with the building permits for ICI work or large residential projects, but they also play a part in the planning process as well and commenting on site plan approvals and subdivision approvals, fire access routes. So they do play a part in the entire development process or approval process.
Okay, thank you. Second question, and do you see in the future with our growth more a chance of getting behind on the inspections, or are we going to be able to keep up? Your opinion.
From a fire standpoint or a building standpoint? A building standpoint, we are currently in the process of trying to hire an additional building inspector, which was approved in last year's budget. That once we have that individual in place, then I believe we'll be in a good position moving forward.
From a fire point of view?
From a fire point of view, I know that they struggle already with the current growth we have, so it's I suspect that we'll have some concerns in the future.
Go ahead, Councillor Jerome.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the appropriate staff, just about the crossing guards. I had brought up in the December meeting that if we could look at the remuneration, and I was told by CEO that was in progress. I just want to know if these numbers reflect that, or if that's still ongoing. Through Mr. Mayor, the intent is that we have done an organizational review and a salary review. We are going to bring the report forward to council sometime in March. We want to, the report was not finalized. We don't want to, we want to go through this process first, and then we're going to bring it. I have actually had a chance to speak this morning anyway with our HR person. She has done the assessment. Our CBO who looks after the crossing guard is involved in it. So we have what other municipalities are paying all the crossing guards throughout the Niagara region, and we have, based on that, come out what value we are providing them, what wages we are providing them, and what would be and that recommendation will come to council.
So you're just gathering the information, you're saying, basically?
So the information has already been gathered from different municipalities. We have identified where we are, and we have also identified where we have to be. Thank you.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Mayor, just to
Yeah.
continue, I'm just wondering why the gross expenditure was more in 2019 than 2020. I don't know if the CAO or CFO can answer that. Is there a reason? I'm just curious why there's a drop in gross expenditure for the crossing guards. On page 23. G234.
Through Mr. Mayor, in 2019, there was $3,800 allocated for general supplies, and that dropped to a request of $600 in 2020. And perhaps our CBO could provide justification for the reduction.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Jason.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, so last year during the budget, we saw a need to provide new equipment to the crossing guards. So we had an increased supplies budget that was approved last year. Since we have purchased a lot of the equipment by now, we were able to reduce that budget for the supplies.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Just to go back in regards to Councillor DeRose in regards to crossing guards, can I ask when will the report be coming to council in regards to the wages, and when are we expecting that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it will come in first meeting in March. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just on that note, if, and I'm assuming there will need to be an increase to their wages, then how does that affect our budget? Do we just have a budget overrun? Or should we not put an increase in here to cover that? Maybe that's through you, Mr. Mayor, to Maria? I'm not sure how we would normally do that.
Through Mr. Mayor, the CAO has made a provision for an amount to be included. I'm not certain at what level that amount will cover, but there is a small provision in there for the increase.
Thank you.
Okay, I got Councillor Neal.
That was my question.
Okay, Councillor Hanley.
Just one other thing I'll ask every year. Is there any reason why the school boards don't help the municipalities pay for crossing guards, since it's their students that we're getting to the schools? And they always seem that they look at us as our responsibility for their costing.
That's a good question.
Anyone want to tackle that? I brought that up in previous budgets when I was on the floor. Because I have I've had the same feeling.
Can I ask then, maybe if I can reword it, then why isn't it that if we put a motion on the floor, that we have discussions with the school boards? I don't see any reason to it. Why are we picking up all these costs, and have been for several decades, and yet it's a service that's providing to the schools, and when you look at it, the schools do not pay property taxes. So we're actually getting no revenue from them, but yet we're spending tax dollars on them. So I think it might be only fair that we ask for a report in regards to cost sharing in regards to crossing guards, if we could do it that way.
Okay. Duly noted. One sec. Do you want to make a formal motion?
I'd like to put a formal motion on the floor that we approach school boards in regards to that. And I think I made a valid point. They do not pay property taxes to the city, but yet every resident in the city of Thorold, whether you have children or not, pays into that tax base, and there's no reason they shouldn't be profit sharing in regards to the costing for crossing guards. Equally shared.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Handley, do you want that to go to other municipalities as well? Because throughout Ontario, everybody's funding it to that crossing guard.
Why not? Let's not see it.
Right, exactly. If you're going to the school boards, might as well go to the other municipalities so that we have more people lining up in support of it. That will have a better chance.
Everybody's always uploading and downloading costs on us. Why can't we research the possibility of doing the same to them,
Okay, go ahead.
be it
Ken.
school boards or not?
Do you want to speak to that?
Yes.
Okay.
I would think that's probably provincially legislated, and it's probably come up before in the province that other cities talked about it, and that's the way it's paid. Thorold's not going to change the rules.
That's why I said I brought it up I bring it up every
No, I
meeting.
brought it up too. Go anyway, our clerk wants to make a comment.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point, can we just leave the motion that staff be directed to commence discussions with both school boards for cross-sharing of crossing guards? We can do the circulation to others after we have a position, because it's
Yeah.
too
Okay,
premature
let's-
to do that at this point.
Okay.
So right now, have the discussions, we'll bring back a recommendation to be supported by all of Ontario or just Niagara, whatever you choose.
Okay,
No harm done if you don't try.
so that's the motion that Donna read. Is there any further discussion on that motion before we vote on it?
Just have comment.
You want to make a comment?
Just comment on, let's say if through our discussion we found that it is provincially legislature that Councillor Kenny has mentioned, then why don't we even approach the province at that time?
Well, then that can be an issue.
The second step, yeah.
That could be an AMO issue when we have our meeting. Okay, so that's the motion, and do you want to read it? Because you, yeah.
The motion on the floor is that staff be directed to commence discussions with both school boards for cost sharing of crossing guards.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? It's 1, 2, 3 for carry. Okay. And John. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the chief building official. Just on residential licensing, how many properties are licensed now, Jason, approximately?
You, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's just over 500.
Okay. Do you know how many years we've been doing this now?
160.
I know you weren't here when it was implemented.
562 is what Donna just...
I just signed like 562 here.
560. No, it's more than 2 years.
Actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe this January is the 2-year mark.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
So can you tell me what your forecast is, what that number will be next January 22nd? Do you have a goal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a set goal, but I anticipate those numbers are going to increase significantly as we now, as of this past December, have enforcement tools in place to be able to use to help get compliance. As well as we have recently been doing a lot of proactive investigations and have been creating a list of properties that are non-compliant, and the stream of applications have been coming in regularly since.
Go ahead.
Go 8 a week? 8 more a week? Been in sales all my life. That's what my bosses always say. You need targets. So we can do 8 a week, can't we?
We can shoot for it.
Good.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor, go ahead, Councillor.
In regards to the individual who's already been in compliance now, you know, and they see or whatever, and they find out that, yeah, we still haven't licensed people who haven't been in compliance for 2 years, and now they don't come up, like, obviously, we're gonna send them renewal, and they don't pay the renewal fee, now will be a backlog chasing them too, because I'm just, what are we gonna do when, because I know I have people out there that have concerns that they were up front and been paying it, and know that the city's struggling with getting everybody licensed, and they're coming up to a point where they now have to pay for a renewal, and yet we're chasing people that haven't paid a cent yet.
Go ahead.
How fair is that to them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that has been a concern I've heard many times. And it is a lot of work. There's no question the program is a lot of work. Doing investigations, investigating properties that are potential rentals and not in compliance, as well as keeping on top of the ones that are licensed. Again, we're the ones, or we just in December got the enforcement tools that we needed. So those who choose not to renew their license and continue to rent, we now have those tools to find those individuals as well for being in non-compliance, and the fines are just as much as the license, if not more in cases. So there will be a lot of incentive to come into compliance.
And I can tell you, just by who called me, there's people calling in all the time about properties that they
See,
know.
that's a concern. We're gonna have people that have been in compliance for 2 years, and now could get charged or fined because now we got their information, and yet we'll still have individuals out there that have never been licensed, and they're not gonna get fined until we license them. One other question: do we treat it like we do by law enforcement? You don't respond unless it's based on complaints. So if a bylaw officer drove by a sign that said apartment for rent, do they research to see whether or not that's actually a licensed property? Because I drive around this municipality quite often and you see signs all over the place, and I'm wanting to know that, do we ignore them signs or would you actually register them and document them?
Through Mr. Mayor, we do it proactively, and I'll say we do by law enforcement proactively as well. But the majority of the properties that we have on our list of non-compliant, I'd say probably at least 90% of that has been through proactive investigations.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, and go ahead, Ken.
Through Mr. Mayor, Jason. Sorry. And let's assume you go to someone tomorrow and they need to get their license. Do you backdate it to 2 years ago when it started, the program started, or do you start from this day on? Because that's one thing I think would make it fairer to the people that have complied from the beginning. So what's your stand on that or your opinion?
Through Mr. Mayor, the current process is that the license is from the date that they get it for 2 years. We don't look at it any different than a driver's license. There's lots of people that are out on the road driving without a driver's license, and their driver's license, once they obtain it, doesn't go back to when they should have obtained their license. It's from that day forward, and that's what they're paying for, is for 2 years. So it's our current process, and I believe it is the right process, is to from when they get caught, or whether they get caught or not, from when they apply for their license, it's $500 for 2 years from that point forward.
But also they've been kind of, the ones that are purposely misleading you, I would think they deserve some kind of punishment besides a fine. Like, that's what I'm saying. If they've been renting the last 2 years, why aren't they paying for those 2 years under the program? That's.
The other issue with that, it's very hard to determine how long somebody's been renting for. Anything that we have to be able to prove everything. It sounds like an ideal situation if we were to be able to do that, but it would be very difficult to actually enforce that. It's something that we could certainly look at the time that we do a thorough review of the bylaw, but at this point in time, it's not the practice.
I can only say that since Jason's been working on this and streamlining the process and putting the fines in place, we're miles ahead of where we were. And we're moving in the right direction, and a testament to that is the number of municipalities that are calling the city of Thorold to get our information because they want to implement the same system. And it's local municipalities and municipalities far away as Windsor that have come and asked for our information. So go ahead, Councillor Kim.
Just a point of order here, like, we're here for a budget meeting. These questions should be about this budget book, not how we're running the bylaws stuff.
It
I
is
think we
about the
should
budget,
stick-
Coun-
I think we should
resent-
stick to the book and follow along.
But
I
that
resent that. This is a budget meeting. We have the right to ask any
I'll
question.
do the speaking. Okay, that is part of the process under the bylaw, and that's why they're asking the question. Okay, so any more questions? Seeing none, we'll move forward to the CAO.
Yeah. Do we have to ask whether or not we can ask a question now?
No, you ask, if you have a question.
But from what Councillor Kenny said, like, you've only been in one budget meeting, but we have the right at a budget meeting to ask any questions we want as a staff member.
About the budget.
And that's what we're talking about, is the budget, because we're asking him in regards to finances and revenue.
Okay, so
and how it's
listen.
maintained and licensed, because that's how we create our revenue.
The
And
chair
whether or
has
not
made
people
a
be-
decision that that was a fair question, and we move forward now. So I'm not going to sit here and have a debate between
Well, that's why I just want to
council.
ask, do we have to ask a question whether or not it can be asked a
No,
question?
I said that those questions were fine, based
Okay.
on the topic we were discussing. So now, that decision's been made, and we're moving forward. I'm not going to sit here and re-debate it now. Okay. We're on to the CAO. Go ahead.
Members of
Councillor.
council, I see that members of council wages have actually gone down $13,005 from 2019. And I'm just asking, is that because council wages are actually going down? Because the funny thing about it is, we're making less money now than we did the last term of council. And not to bring it up, but I think that we need to, and it's during the budget, that we need to discuss a fair pay increment for the taxpayer, for the councillors in the city of Thorold. You know, we need to be fair about this. We've gone long enough, and I'm not here about the money and that stuff, but I'm looking at it, let's be fair and let's use some common sense here in regards to it. We're serving the community and that stuff, and we realize it, and we knew when we registered for council what we were getting into, but our pay is actually decreasing, not increasing, because now we are taxable on 33 1/3% of our wages, where at one time it was a non-taxable benefit. And it's actually more detrimental to us now than it was in the past. So can we discuss or put it in the budget at one time in regard to discuss a pay increment or
But
do a
I-
study?
We can, that'll be up to the will of council, but the pay differential was made whole last term of council.
But it doesn't actually, it was made whole in regards to it, but still in the tax increment of it, it isn't made whole. We're actually losing money.
Can you comment on that, Director?
Because we remember, we have to add it to our regular income as
No, but
individuals.
That's got
too.
nothing to do with your
Yeah,
regular
through you,
income.
Mr. Mayor,
Back in council income.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, council did approve the previous term of council that was outgoing. They did approve that the council wages be grossed up to equalize the fact that the non-taxable portion was going to be eliminated. Of course, that is just your council income, not how it impacts your income once you add it to your normal income. You know, in terms of the bylaw that's on the books, it's been, the bylaw's been on the books for many, many years, and the council increase is based on 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is the lower.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but if we could just maybe, see, I bring that up because they had done a review a couple of years ago in regards to council, and I could never believe that council actually voted a pay increase for the mayor, but didn't vote a pay increase for council. And I think that at the time, I wasn't a member of council at that time, was wrong, that if you were going to give a pay increase to one council member, then there should have been some equality amongst all council members in regards to pay. And I'm just wanting to know that maybe we should look into that and have a report or a discussion in regards to it.
Want to talk about it at this point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 153 of the budget book, there's a page that talks about a reserve for the Municipal Modernization Fund. Part of that, from when council originally accepted the recommendations to spend the money, there's been some changes within. We've been able to go in a different route with our building permit software and such, so left over some money. Part of it, I'm proposing to do a ward boundary review in 2020. This will look at whether we should be at large, if we should be wards, because we've grown so much and our polling subdivisions are all, they're not equal, which they should be. Once it comes out what we should be ward or at large, it'll also give appropriate wages tied to that. So I think it should be covered through that process.
Okay, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, in support of Councillor Hanley, I agree with what he said, but when I wasn't on council and I negotiated contracts in the past, I was always upset when somebody got more than the people they were negotiating for. I'd like to put, I don't know if I can, put a motion on the floor that councillors' raise every year is what the unionized workers in the city got the previous year. And that way you never have to negotiate a raise for future councillors, because it's simply what you gave the workers that you negotiated with the previous year. It's very simple, and I think it's fair. If you thought they should get a pay freeze, well, next year you're going to get a pay freeze, and vice versa. So I'd like to put a motion on the floor that the city councillors get a raise each year that is the same as the unionized workers of the city of Thorold got the previous year.
Go on. Wait, we got a motion on the floor.
What unionized workers?
Which union?
Yeah.
Sorry? Which union? We have 3 unions, sorry. You mean QP?
Yes.
Are we speaking to the motion now? We're going to... Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
I'll speak to that motion as well. I don't disagree with, but I believe, I have to give my opinion about it though, right? I believe that it should be reviewed, because it shouldn't just be in addition to, or whatever anybody's raise is getting. We're not at par with the rest of the municipalities. So it was a couple years ago that council asked staff for a report to see if we were in line. We weren't in line, and council at that time didn't put council in line. So to just give us 2% or 3%, I don't think is fair. And my point behind that isn't selfishly. I think what's happening is there's such a gap that's going on that now we've made it so that the only individuals that will run for council are business owners or in positions where, you know, maybe they can influence. I don't know. I don't want to say that and say that if you're a business owner, you're only looking to influence. But it should be accessible to anybody. So, you know, maybe you're middle income and you want to run for council, but you also need to have a secondary job, which is most Canadians, most people in the Niagara region. You could potentially work at Tim Hortons and make more per hour than you would being on council. And again, just to echo what was said, obviously we didn't come here to make the money. We want to help, but I just think it's wrong if we don't look at how our pay compares to other municipalities to make sure that we leave this as an opportunity for anybody in our community to run for, not for the fact that they would want to help their community and represent us but can't afford to do that. And so I do support that, but I think before we do that, we have to review and make sure that we're in line, and then yes, we could implement something.
Okay, so but there's a system in place as it is. If we want to do an overall review, then there's a system in place right now that finance uses every year, which is 2% or the cost of living, whichever is less. And that's in place until they do a review, and then the review can come back for recommendation. That would be the prudent way to do business, I think, but that's my opinion.
So, sorry, can I just speak to that?
Is that fine?
Well, can I then, I don't know if I can, but can I then put a motion on the floor that we do a review? Or would you accept a friendly? Can you not do it?
No, right now,
well, we're not doing it. We have to ask to do it to add.
The review's done by an independent party. Go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the review is included as part of the Municipal Modernization Fund. So you don't have to ask for that. Money's being reallocated to do that, to do a review. It's going to do a ward boundary as well as the salary.
Councillor Hanlon.
I think just to explain a little further, I think the review and what Donna's, or this, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk's intention is that they're looking at a ward boundary thing because the municipality is expanding, and we have some areas in regards to where current polling stations are that have 1,600 people, and we have polling stations that have 3,500 people. Then we have polling stations that have 2,300 people. So for an equalization of everything, she's looking at making it as was proposed before. I think Ron Devereaux put it before the courts before for us, and they didn't accept it. But now it's getting to a position, because we're expanding our boundaries, that a ward system may be something that we would go to. And then at the same time, in that review would be a review of what would be fair pay for each counselor in each ward.
Yeah.
Right? More or less. That's the intention, because we're off kiltered now. We have more people living in areas than what we're actually getting representation for as a council as a whole.
Go ahead to the CAO.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the two things. First thing is that to determine whether we should be at large or we have to have zone boundaries, because certain municipalities like Niagara Falls, they are at large, and other ones are boundaries like St. Catharines. So when this process is done, it'll be a two-step process for salary increases for council. I guess at that point, we will do a comparison where we stand, bring it up to the right benchmark, and then after that, once you have the right base, then you can vote to get the same amount of increases every year as what our QP union gets. We can do that. But I understand what Councillor Wilson is saying is that the base is still not appropriate. So first we have to maintain that we are at the right base. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Durham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. Is that on page 60 of the deferrals, capital budget, sorry. I just wanted to ask you, is that what you're talking about there, the second under CAO, this organization review, salary review? Is that what you're just saying that's being done? Is it something
No,
separate?
that's something different.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so are we good with what's happening already within the clerk's department?
Do they want to make an amendment to the motion to just cover this year until the salary review is done? So it would read that City Council receive a 2020 salary increase to align with increase previous negotiated annually until such time as the salary
But
is
they're already getting it.
just leave it at that.
So
Motion's being withdrawn.
I don't know if it's being withdrawn. So right now, we know that's being done. The salary review, the ward review, the whole review. And we know there's a system in place, which is 2% or the cost of living, whichever is less. Is everybody happy with that until this review's done? Then you have to withdraw your motion
When's the review going to be done?
this year.
You have a date, Donna? Sorry.
A ward boundary review is a lengthy process, so I would imagine bringing something back October, November.
Okay?
Next year.
There's a lot of public consultation that goes into this. It's a lengthy study.
That's fair, seeing that at that time, then we'll be into the next budget,
You'll be-
2021, and then the costing into our budget then.
Is everybody good with that? Okay?
I'll withdraw.
Okay, so that's where we're at. Okay, any further questions under CAO? Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CAO. Under transit, it's a huge net expenditure. Last year, we provided something from Brock. Are we still being provided funding from Brock University for transit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they have provided $50,000 as a one-time at that time.
So we're not getting anything this year?
We have to again negotiate with them, because when we spoke with the student union, you recall that they were not interested in paying anything. It has actually come from Brock University, who came in, and then they have said at that time that they are going to pay $50,000 as one-time expense. So we got some that money transferred over. So part of it was utilized for 19, my understanding, and part we are utilizing for 20. But we can always go back to the student union with our ask, that what we have been asking them, that they should be compensating us more. Thank you.
So you can get the whole numbers from the transit, and we can go through that whole process
So
again.
do we need a motion for you to continue those discussions, or?
Yeah, it'd be good.
Can I
Okay,
put a motion forward to that effect, please?
so So there's a motion to continue the discussions with Brock and Brock Student Union on the transit issue. Okay? Go ahead, Council.
Just in regards
You
to
going to
just,
speak on that motion?
yeah, on the transit.
Okay.
Time.
On this particular motion.
Timeline.
Have to be done before next school year.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have been talking to them, pretty much was talking to them throughout the year. We will start for the next school year, which will start from September. So I think the money that they have offered us would cover us up to this school year. So what we'll do is, but we'll keep negotiating with the student union and include Brock University in our discussions as well as required. Thank you.
Could I just, on top of that, could we put an actual time frame to it? I don't want it to be brought to me September when school's already in. Could it be 30 days before the school year? Or we may need to make a discussion in regards to it.
I say no.
Yeah.
July is good.
Yeah, July.
July is good.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Sens.
Yeah, just along with that motion, I agree, but is there some way to negotiate with them, not in the negotiation, to say, we don't want to revisit this every year? Like, this should just be part of, this is what it costs, this is what you pay per year. Do we really have to do this every year? Sorry, or a friendly amendment, or whatever you think, Councillor Longo?
I would love to see it be permanent, because if I recall correctly, we had a $200,000 increase in transit costs last year. We asked for 100,000?
No, 100,000, we asked for 50.
It was 100 and we...
100? Okay, sorry. Okay, and they offered 50, even though their benefit was greater than ours, because their ridership is much greater than ours.
It was pretty close, because it included, don't forget, included all our routes. So when you looked at the ridership, it was almost 50-50. That's why we went with that on them.
Yeah, I agree that it should be an annual thing without more meetings. Less meetings are always good.
I know. But I can't guarantee that's what's going to happen. We do this on a yearly basis. We'll do the best we can to make it long term, but it's always been a constant negotiation. And we've come a long way from where we were, because I started this ball rolling and got the first increase when we were in the last term of council. What's that?
That the CAO be requested to work toward a more permanent solution to this matter?
Yep.
Can I read it?
Yep, read that.
So through the mayor, I have a motion that the CAO be directed to negotiate with BUSU and Brock University for additional funding for transit for school year 2020-2021, that the CAO be requested to work toward a more permanent solution to this matter, and that the CAO bring back a report no later than July 2020.
Is that good? Okay. Motion's on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carry. Okay. Any further questions under CAO? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might have missed it elsewhere, but through you to the CAO, the business development officer that we were going to hire, which we haven't yet, would that normally be under here? Okay.
Yeah.
And what, obviously, we didn't hire anybody, so where is that money going to be allocated? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council has approved to hire an economic development officer last year. We did try to hire one in August. Unfortunately, we did not get any decent applications, because when we find out that because of the amalgamation, everybody was staying put and nobody was trying to move. So we did interview a few candidates, but there were none that was we found that suitable for us. We went again, we advertised again in November. We did the interview process again in the position closed last year in December. We did the interviews. We shortlisted 4 candidates we thought would be suited for us based on the resumes that we received. One candidate withdrew, got the job elsewhere. We interviewed 3 candidates. We had one candidate that satisfied our needs, worked in adjacent municipalities, have all the credentials and everything that we thought would be good for us. Someone who is connected in the industry in the agro region. Unfortunately, that person declined, that he's not going to be joining us. So we understand the importance of this position. However, the more important is to hire the right candidate. I just don't want to fill up the position just like that, because we need the right candidate who understand what we are, what the nature of business we are in, how we can, and someone who is connected both at the regional, provincial, and federal levels, so that they can actually move us forward. Thank you. So our search is ongoing. Thank you.
So do you think, like, in not being successful twice, obviously one was for amalgamation, but do you think, are we not offering the appropriate salary, or where are we, why do they not want to join this fabulous city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, part of it is salary as well, because we are not offering a decent level of salaries. So the pool of candidates who are applying to us are pretty much the bottom of the totem pole, I would say, not a seasoned person. We were lucky that one of the candidates who did apply to us had about 20 years of experience in addition in another municipality within the Niagara region. Unfortunately, when he did his stuff and he said, why would I go for a lateral move when I'm secured here? And so I had a good discussion with the gentleman this morning as well, and said, unfortunately, I think I'm here. Certainly, if we pay appropriately to this for this position, I'm sure. And then the other thing that we have done it, or will do it when we are going to repost it, instead of calling it an EDO, Economic Development Officer, because it is a manager level position, which is in our grid system, we will call it as Manager of Economic Development, and that certainly will make a difference. Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry, just on that point, how far I did last year is that is a very important role for us here, so that we can do what Maria was talking about, where we have a balance between residential and commercial, obviously. So could you please advise us on where we really should be at, so we could decide?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and when I'm going to bring this whole salary review in March, you can see, because we have retained a professional who has looked at the comparative salaries and the grid, the entire grid. And we are certainly deficient in not only on that, on number of other or most of the positions. So just to keep the integrity of the grid, we don't want to just take a position up and then adjust it. Certainly, when I'm going to bring it in March, we are going to show it to council what is the difference. What we are going to do in the interim, we could advertise it as Manager of Economic Development. We are going to look at it, rejig the position a little bit, and see, and we will not post the salary at that time, just to see who is available, and at that time, if we could able to, by that time, we will go to council in March, and hopefully council agrees to the increase, and then we can have, because the current salary and the current position that we are offering, EDO, there is not much luck for us. Thank you.
I'm just thinking, from the savings of last year, we could take some of that and apply it to the next few years.
There is some savings from last year that go into the reserves. And so there's money there. Plus, if we don't hire until March, then there's a couple of months this year where we haven't paid salary. So when he brings it back, we can see where we are.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, even though we have the monies in the past for various positions, but we had candidates, but they were not the right candidates. So we don't want to hire someone for the sake of hiring, because we have a position. We want to make sure that it is the right fit for the organization. And then when they join us, they are, start running the very first day when they are here. There is no least amount of learning curve, and we can get benefit off from them. So certainly we have saved more than $60,000 on that wages, but there are a number of other positions that we either delayed hiring or with other issues. So there is tremendous amount of money that was gone into the reserve. Thank you.
And the position, it's going to be extremely important because of an initiative that is coming out of the region with the cities that have economic development teams are going to work in conjunction with the region, and they're going to work together in a strategic effort. And so it's important that we get this position filled as you said, moving forward, because it's, I mean, you want to be in the game, you got to be at the table. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions under CAO? Because we're going to move into the big ticket item next, operations. Okay, operations. Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yes, 721, G721, the Arena Division, $1.3 million, $1.369 million, and then when you flip the page over, I don't see the breakdown. Yeah, well, it only equates to that. I'm so, like, the full breakdown of the money?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 27, the first one right at the top, there's your allocation in terms of what's changed for the arena. So what you're looking at is a total increase of roughly $156,000. And on page 27, those are the items that contribute to the increase of $156,000.
Okay, so is this where, are we budgeting for 7 people at the arena or 6?
Go ahead, I'll get the manager of Recreation Facilities.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, currently there will be 7 laborers at the arena until the fall. That's the current plan right now. When we have some additional movement, potentially through retirements or increased headcount over the course of the year, we can look at repurposing a position to backfill that additionally in next year, so to speak.
Does that answer your question? Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Just so I have it straight too, so we're going to keep the 7th person there for now. Do we need a staff report on how to keep the 7th person down there, or what it would take to keep the 7th person down there? Or will this just keep rolling as the 7th person?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, the budget is not reflecting a 7th man at the arena specifically.
Okay.
But as I stated, through potential retirement, we could take a position and potentially split it between the arena, cemetery, arena parks type thing, and backfilling that without a budget impact.
Right, I see that person doing both jobs, right? When they're not at the arena, then they're out in the parks and stuff like that. But how do we set that in stone instead of visiting it every so often?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd have to add additional funds to the budget to basically put that in place, which is essentially a 6-month or a half-season position.
Could I ask for a staff report?
No. Does that get in the deferrals under that? Well, it gets addressed there, am I not correct? I'll ask Jeff.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so what you have in the budget here is the status quo. But we're asking for 2 additional casuals to help us deal with the reallocation of manpower, and that shows up in the deferrals.
So you have to deal with it in the deferrals, okay? It's being addressed, but it's being addressed in deferrals. I had Councillor Hanley. Did you have your hand up?
Good, I'm good.
Okay, I got Councillor Kenny.
There's something down at the arena that I'd like to look at. I don't know if we've budgeted for it, but the person that has been at the arena for a long time and running the refrigeration system, is going to retire in the next couple of years. Having worked at a paper mill for a lot of years, we had specialized people, and the company never acted on it until the person signed to retire and was out the door. I think I would like to see a posting put up within the city for the people that work at the city, the laborers in the QP union, to train somebody. If it's somebody at the arena, he would work at the arena, he would stay on shift, but we would pay to train him. So that down the road, we have somebody that, because otherwise we're going to have to hire outside when our man retires. We don't have anybody trained that can run the system, I don't think.
Do you just want to address that, or where we are?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have recognized that concern as well. So we're going through a process right now where last year we actually did increase the budget for training purposes. We're putting standards in place to get the guys across the board up to speed. We've got some guys that in that arena that are quite talented, and I believe with a little bit of skill set and training, additional training, could replace the individual that you're speaking of with ease. So I'm confident that the individuals coming up through the ranks with some training, some additional coaching, would be a nice addition to the team.
You're confident that you have everything.
So the second part of my question is, so you are confident that when Jerry retires, we do not have to hire somebody outside to replace him. We have the people right now, or will have the people within the city to do that job.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is the ultimate goal, to hire within.
Okay.
Okay? You're good with that? Any further questions for under operations? Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, one question on G713 or G712 trails. I noticed it was cut in half. So we're not going to maintain our trails, or is there a reason for cutting it in half?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was a line item in that specific element that was identified that we weren't exactly sure what it was for, so we reduced it. It was identified as a contract, which we don't have any existing contracts in that, so we took that as an opportunity to take that money as a savings element.
Second question, insurance. Drastic increase in insurance this year. First of all, there's a reason for it, and I noticed it's about over $100,000 increase.
Through Mr. Mayor, the report did come forward last night for approval. What we're seeing with insurance is they're attributing it to just basically two things, really. One is just the global market in terms of, the forest fires that we're seeing, the floods, things like that. So the global market is sort of reacting negatively to these types of insurance claims and insurance pressures. The other thing that they look at when they establish the premiums is what our claims history is like. And it has not been that great in the past 5 years. We have had a few significant claims that have negatively impacted on our premium level. So we do see a huge increase. What we recommended as part of the report was that just to mitigate it, we saved about $25,000 by doing this, but we increased our deductible level from $10,000 to $15,000. And then in order to, to ensure that we are getting the best bang for our buck, we're including in this year's budget just to get a consultant, similar to what we did 5 years ago, to market the plan for 2021, so we can see if there are better rates out there.
Okay. I've got Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Kenny.
Sorry, I actually just had a question on that consultant piece. I guess just maybe looking for some information, because my general understanding is usually have a broker that would then go shop for different insurance. So it was one of my questions of, I think it was like $20,000 or something for an insurance consultant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we really typically have not used a broker in the past. We have gone directly to the insurance companies as opposed to dealing with a broker. We just find that that the policies, there's so many nuances in the policy that we really feel that we do want an expert as opposed to perhaps a broker that represents a particular company.
But typically, a brokerage would represent multiple insurance companies, so they would shop it and find the best value, and then usually outline where the changes are, right? Like where the deficiency are between the plans?
Yeah, we have used, we tried both in the past. We did go out with a broker at one point, and we really didn't get the response that we liked. We actually only had one or two companies that responded. And then we touched base with some of our neighboring municipalities just to see what they had done. And there was a broker not a broker, but an insurance consultant that they had used. And we did go out and we did find that it was beneficial. We just find again that the intricacies within the insurance policies and really comparing the insurance policies, we don't feel that we have the expertise on hand to really assess that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kenny, did you have a question?
Yeah, 781, Canada Day alternate venue. Is that the Canada Day thing at Beaver Dams? You're moving to a different site and it's going to cost 20 grand? Is that what that means?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the concept was that we were hoping to do some refresh to Battle of Beaver Dams Park, and depending on the timing of that, and again, pending council's approval, which you guys are working through right now, we may have to look at an alternate venue. If that would be the case, then we would potentially need to rent a stage and other equipment that is currently commonplace at Battle of Beaver Dams Park.
So to go further on that, the Battle of Beaver Dams Park's the site we want to be at. If we got the grant that we applied for, you remember when we submitted the grant for the Battle of Beaver Dams Park, if that would have interfered, the construction would have interfered with the park, we were getting ready to move it down to McMillan Park and the field behind McMillan Park so that we can continue to the fireworks, the bands, everything. But I feel right now, based on how the funding and no announcements yet, I would say the chances are we're going to be in the Battle of Beaver Dams Park. So the chances are that we may not need that money. But it's in there in case we do need the money. It's a contingent. Hopefully we don't. I'd rather see it at the Battle of Beaver Dams Park and start construction after that weekend, but that's my opinion. Because we have the facilities there. Okay. Any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Decker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have a curious question about the insurance. What type of claims would we have that would increase our insurance that much? I'm just curious.
Through Mr. Mayor, I really think if council wants an answer, we would for that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
I think I know the answer to this, but just the Allenburg Community Center for one, are we going to deal with it this year through strategic planning, or how are we going to deal with it?
I would say the strategic plan's a good place to deal with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it's going to be dealt with.
Okay, Councillor, I'll start with Councillor Hanley.
On that note, just to follow up to Councillor Neal's thing in regards to the strategic plan, another one we're looking at, timeline. We have a lot of...
And you got all that?
No, we do, but I know we're in the process of it, but because, we got a timeline for July for the transportation, so we're getting into a lot of areas where this will be our third one in regard to reports that need to come back to council.
Do you want to speak on
Yeah,
timeline?
so we kickstart, we have retained a consultant. We started the process earlier this month, and I forwarded an email to our staff and also to councillors. The target is to finish it, so there'll be, the first step is going to be that the consultant is going to have a 1-hour interview with each of the councillors just to understand the background. Then they are going to do series of consultations and public forums and others. The target is to finish the whole process by June. So there's a whole performa, there's a whole schedule that has been laid out, and if you should you require, I can actually email councillors the schedule that has been put forward by our consultant, and so it's going to be finished by June. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I got Councillor Wilson.
Okay, so I'd like to put a motion on the floor. If we could then, should we get the funding for the Battle of Beaver Dams Park, that we wait for construction to start till after the Canada Day weekend so that we can not incur a $20,000 charge, or cost, I should say.
Where are we here on that? Do you want to speak on that 20,000? I don't think the whole 20,000 was for a relocation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the challenge with that is based on the grant application. There's certain timeframes that we're obligated to meet to be entitled to the money. So I believe the application that was submitted actually started potentially in the spring if we were to go through with it.
So we have to wait, so you want to leave that there because we don't know where we're at?
That is correct.
So what happened if that 20,000 is not required, it could go in reserves, am I correct?
Yes.
So we still have the money. And then we could decide at that point if there's another usage we want for that. The understanding based on, we could be tied to that because of the grant. And we don't want to tie our hands because of that. Not that we're
Okay,
getting
so
it or not getting it.
if we're tied to it and we have the grant, but let's say we got the grant in June, I'm just saying, I would hate to see that we start construction like a week or two before and then incur a $20,000 cost.
Do it the other way around if you want. Do it the other way around. Take it out, and then if you need it, then we can.
So we could take it out and we could put it back if required? We could put it in reserves. Can we do that, Maria? How would you do that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was having technical difficulties, so I missed the first part of the question. My apologies.
So the talk is that this Canada Day alternate venue 20,000 is to take it out of the budget.
Right.
If we get the grant and we have to use it, then we can move it back in under reserves.
Sure, what we can do as an alternative is we'll, round about the same thing, but we'll just take it we'll leave it in, but we'll have it reserve funding as opposed to levy funded.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Okay.
So that way it's from a reserve, it's not impacting your levy. If you don't need it, it just stays in the reserve.
Okay. And that way, then that'll be 20 out of the levy. Okay? Is that
thank
good
you.
with everyone? Okay. So that change will be made. Any further questions on operations?
Sorry. I
Go
did have
ahead,
one.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I did have another one under that same section, actually, G781. So it says a rec coordinator and then a rec coordinator allocation for half. So that's a wage. The first line's the wage, right? And then the second line, I wasn't sure what that was for. No, how's it a negative?
What page are you on?
Oh, sorry.
I
Page
can answer that.
27. The bottom, like right above the Canada Day alternate venue.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. The rec coordinator, the wage is in G781. And then what we do is, so the wage goes in there, and then if you look at the second item in the rec coordinator allocation under G781, there's a reduction in that account. So what, in that department, so what ends up happening is when they prepared the budget, there's an allocation in terms of where they expect that rec coordinator to spend the time. So there's a negative in 781, and then you'll see a charge to the other departments where the allocation occurs.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay? Is there any further questions?
I see where
Okay. You move to the next page is the graph that shows the general levy allocation as it's split out amongst the city.
It's a lot of red. It's a lot of red there, Terry. Very expensive.
Yeah, this is just gives you an idea of the breakdown. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move on now to the recommended additions from the deferral list, and we'll go department by department. And first up is the GIS position and equipment, and that's Q4 hire. And you received background information on that from Richard. Are there any questions for Richard regarding that position? Or if Richard, do you want to talk about that at all? Or
Just that we're looking as well at opportunities to partner with the Niagara Region IT department. And so and they're also helping us sort of finalize the understanding of the position. So that's why we're looking at the Q4 hire. So it would be subject to the IT discussion that we have with the region, and we could probably bring forward a report to let you know sort of where we're going with that before we do any hiring in Q4.
my question would be for the Director of Finance, and I agree with wholeheartedly with what you said before. Ongoing expense should not be funded out of any surplus or reserve. But the $3,000 for equipment, is that a one-time cost?
Yes, it is.
Can we fund that, take 3,000 out of that 20?
Sure.
And fund that so that,
Sure.
or from.
We'll find a reserve
Find it,
for it.
because it's a
Sure.
one-time cost?
Yep.
Can we fund that?
Absolutely.
On the reserve side and just fund the position,
Sure.
because that's an ongoing expense? Does everybody understand the difference? Ongoing expense, you want to make sure you ingrain in the budget. Go ahead for that, Richard.
Added to that, we've, for the year 2021, we would offer not having a planning student assisting us, so that would change the annualized impact of 2021 by, we'd reduce it by $15,000. We would also look to attributing about 40% of the wage to the building department, as the GIS analyst would be servicing the building department as well, and so that would also reduce the annualized impact.
That's where the money is, right, in the building department. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
If we do agree to this, what impact will it have? I see 2021, it's going to have a $52,500 impact in 2021? And how much in 2022, though, if we keep the person on? Would it then be up to like $80,000?
The annualized impact would be $70,000. That includes wages and benefits.
And that's your 17.5 and 52, because you're already ingrained in the 17.5. Yeah.
Now, just to go through this again, it's in regards to IT position?
No, that's
Or
the
GIS?
GIS is a different position.
IT's below it? GIS?
IT's the next one, okay? Do you want to?
Yeah, just wanted to add to it what Richard has said. In 2021 and 2022, you're asking, Councillor, 70,000, what I understand, is not going to come from the tax levy. If we are funding that position, 40% of it through building, so 40% of that 70,000, which is 28,000, would come from building funds, and 32 will be the impact on the levy. Thank you.
Okay, just the position, I don't know. I can't find it in the 2019 budget. Is this carry over from that? Or is this a new position that we're creating in 2020? Because I can't find in 2019's budget where it's a carryover.
It was
Or
a
deferred then.
deferral last year, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
This would be, what we did, actually, we found some efficiencies in the department, and we combined the planning clerk and the building clerk into one position, and there was some leftover monies available to us. That has been now reallocated through to achieve the 2% and 1% that council has, or that we're working towards. But there was a cost savings that we did by creating those efficiencies, and we wanted to use that money to help fund the IT department, or the GIS analyst.
Okay, it wasn't there, sorry, but I did see it. But the thing was, you had $70,000 total, but in 2019 it was estimated $85,000. So I guess we're looking at the same position that was deferred in 2019, just at a lesser wage.
It is a lesser wage because we've looked at it in a different light, and the discussions with the region is helping us with that.
And one other question. Would this be a position we would need to duplicate or triplicate in the future? Is this something that's going to sustain us into the future for a number of years?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hanley, this position is a position that will help the Building and Planning Department, and also hopefully help the Economic Development Officer when the person comes available. We're seeing this as a real stepping stone to having more efficiencies created through the rest of the departments, such as operations and public works, and so depending on how we roll this out, or the opportunities that would come from this GIS person, we can find additional efficiencies in other departments as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on this position? So I'd like to have a motion from someone on the floor to include this as part of the budget. Do I have a motion, Councillor Sentence, that the GIS position Q4 hire be included in the 220 budget? Any further discussion on that? Go ahead.
I'd just like to ask a question. Can we, instead of doing it this way, can't we go through all the deferrals and then decide what we want to do? Like, instead, what's that? Prioritize. Exactly. Like, we have a wish list that we don't really know the total cost of it, and if we take one position at a time, we're going to be weighing them against each other. I'd just like to go through all the deferrals and decide which ones we like, which ones we want to keep.
Doing that, but it's laid out here. The cost is there. Every position's laid out. It tells you exactly what the cost is.
Instead of debating it, then I'll put a motion on the floor that we just accept all the deferrals. Which we'll accept all the deferrals, because personally, like, I agree with Councillor Kenny in that, because if I'm going to vote for the 70,000, I'm going to vote for the additional 2 casuals for the project manager. I'm going to vote for the 2 additional staff for the cemetery department. I'm going to vote for the extra secretary for the receptionist at 24/9, and justification on that because of the savings that has been seen in our in regards to the position of the clerk and that stuff. I don't know if council's aware of it, but that would be one position that's basically paid for itself. There's an e-scribe fee change that's coming up. We're looking at, instead of using internal positions and that stuff at the city, going and being the mailman for the city and driving their own personal vehicles, whatever, is that we're going to hire a company on full-time that'll come in the morning and pick up our mail and go at 4:30 and drop off the mail, instead of using city employees who use their personal vehicles, and when they get into an accident which has occurred, the city didn't cover them on the insurance end. They were on the loop for themselves. We're going to change the position in regards to what they call a vote manager, with talking to the clerk, and also in regards to storing our documents and that stuff what are presently stored on Highway 20 at a cost of $2,400 a year. We're going to use, I don't know if council aware, but we're thinking of what we're going to do to 8 Carlton Street North. We're now going to use it as an area to store our documents because we're storing them and paying for them, so it would be internal. We would save money there. We've changed the phone systems at the city. I know we don't know the costing for all departments. We haven't gotten it from the cemetery yet or the arena, but they changed and got out of the Bell system. In the clerk's department alone, we're looking at a savings of $1,600 a month already. They already seen that from the savings. We get 200 calls plus a day. That's been coming into the reception, and right now we're trying to get it so that there's actually a live person on the line. So what's happening is if the original person doesn't hang up, it gets transferred down the line, so then eventually they do get a person. So for the 29,000, I could, if we went through it all, we could probably justify just the savings alone that the clerk's department has developed in this year. Example, photocopiers. One photocopier example costs us $1,680, and we presently have 5 of them, so it's $8,400 a year. We're going to go down to 2, so it's $36, and they're going to, through Curtis Dray and that stuff, they're looking at how we could make the office area in here more efficient. And that, so
you're good with everything. Is there any positions then in here that someone wants to talk about that they don't agree with?
I think, if I could just one more comment, I'll end it. We need feet on the ground in this municipality. We're growing bigger and bigger.
I couldn't agree more.
And we're expanding out further and further, but yet we're always not looking for what we want. And we want a good public image, and this will help us maintain a public image. I know it might be a hit on the taxpayers, but I also looked at, in a couple years down the road, it's going to change in regards to the impact on the municipality. It might only be a growth impact of 1.7 or whatever this year, 2.3, but we're not going to see the actual impact until 2 or 3 years down the road what it's really going to be. So I'd like to address it now.
Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We're referring just to page 29, am I correct?
You are right, 100%.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, did you have it? We're just talking page 29 here.
Yes. Well, I had highlighted the IT analyst, not to pick on any one department, but sorry, Maria, could you tell us?
Sure. What we're finding is the requirements that have been placed on, we have one individual right now in the IT department, and from the time that he's been with us since 2016, and since that time we've seen more and more new systems come on stream, like for example, the phones. We just switched from from the old Bell landlines to the internet, the VoIP system. That places demands on Matt when to troubleshoot things, cell phones. We've got the electronic management system that's coming on stream. We're looking at automated meter readings for the water meters, as opposed to what we're doing now, with the guy going around, house to house with the gun. Clerk's department is using the program that they use for all this complaint tracking is Citywide Works. We're seeing more and more people. We've got more people in the city, which again places more demands on our IT guy. We are looking at going with mobile hardware and software system for our building inspector and our bylaw people. There's access control cards for the systems for the city facilities. Most of the facilities now have computers and Wi-Fi. We're looking at expanding our Wi-Fi for some of the locations so that we can have public Wi-Fi access points and controlling that. So I think it's just a matter of our needs have grown, our IT needs have grown, our staff has grown. The expectation of staff has grown. Back in the day, we didn't have anybody, and if you had a problem, or if a department manager had a problem, you'd have to Google and say, how can I solve this problem? Well, that is the option, but unfortunately, if they're busy doing that, then it just takes away from more productive and more efficient things that we could be doing to service. Like for us, some of our customers are internal. We don't do the best job right now that we can to service our internal customers.
Okay, so, not to jump on one point that you made, but just with the electronic meter reading, and then in Public Works, we have the water meter technician position, so he kind of threw you under the bus there, Jeff, so do you really need an additional person?
No,
Or will
that's
that then
Public
eliminate a position?
That's Public Works.
So, Mr. Mayor, the water meter technician position is to help us deal with the backlog of complaints and reads that come in that need to be checked. I think we're behind by about 262 complaints, so we're not responding to those issues now because we have to take somebody off of their job and deal with that. We're also moving ahead with a water meter replacement program, and to have somebody available with to deal with the implementation of that program exclusively. It's a huge advantage based on the advice that we've got from St. Catharines and Welland and other municipalities that have successfully replaced their water meters. So that position, which is funded fully from the water reserve, would be a critical component in us maintaining our current customer service levels and implementing the water meter replacement program.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Decker.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm actually going to agree with Councillor Hanley that I'm all for them as well. I think that we have to have the right people in place, so let's go for it.
Mr. Mayor, on that note, I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we accept the recommended deferrals, GIC position, IT analyst, Public Works additional casuals, CS, cemetery services, what's the additional casuals, reception at 24.9, CS administration at 34.4. I can talk in that too, what that is. We have the
You
girl.
wanna
Okay,
you're just
pass them
putting
all.
Okay, so can I make a friendly amendment?
Yes, go ahead.
My friendly amendment would be that the IT equipment, that the administrative equipment be taken out of their one-time cost and they be funded.
I accept your friendly amendment.
And that we just do the ongoing cost, which are the wages.
Yes.
Are you good with that friendly
Yes.
amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor, that we accept all the positions except the equipment, all the equipment be funded out of reserve. Okay?
Yes.
You're good with that?
Yes.
So we got the friendly amendment. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And you understand that this is all going to get put in the budget, and then at the end, we got another chance if we want to make any change. Now, this wraps this up. I think it's a good time to wrap up tonight's meeting so that at the next meeting, we can deal with other referrals in the capital budget. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting then? Councillor Decker, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It was a good meeting, good discussion, and we'll move forward next Tuesday, same time, 6:30.